this is a demonstration basically on how easy it is to just build a quick response application that is automatically adapted to all types of screens, and that uses the frameworks, the function that we have included with the Apple frameworks for the basic animations, and the result is pretty amazing how fast we can build something like a dice game with just a very little amount of code. If you know the functions. So I prepared here a starter project. And so
Go ahead and bend it like that.
yeah, Mark. I'm seeing the letters really, really tiny on this. When it comes to the code, I'll zoom in. Okay, so I'm going to go directly to show you guys how we use our layout to build some components here. This is we have two obvious components on this project. One is the storyboard, which is the UI elements we're going to put in our application, and the second one is our view controller, which is the code, obviously, that will dictate the behavior of these elements on the screen. I'm going to start by setting color, because this is going to be like when you go to the casinos and you play dice and you press random elements. I'm going to be adding some graphical stuff like images. I've imported in this project a few images, as you can hear, which are basically images of dice. Okay, and the background and the stuff that we're going to be needing. So letters are so tiny. Okay, so and here I'm going to get, for example, the image of the first dice. Then I'm going to copy it. Second dice. And then there's two ways in which we can put, like say, rules of behavioral rules in the user interface for the elements. One is the first and most primitive that Apple included is the constraints, and another one that came up in Xcode 6 or 7, I'm not sure which one it was, is the stacks, which makes things, a little tricky, but saves us a lot of time. So I'm going to use a combination of both. So I'm going to take these two elements on the screen, and I'm going to stack them. Unfortunately, because this presentation has, was thought for a whole hour, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to go into detail and explain to you guys how to do it, But since all of you guys have already programmed Xcode, you're probably very familiar with what I'm doing. I'm going to add a label in which I'm going to display the outcome of the game. And I'm going to insert here a little Unicode character, the dice, space, set the size, let's see, 50, semicolon. I'm going to set a color that will be this, and set a shadow, black shadow. Okay, now I have a label in which I'm going to display the result from the dice roll. Next thing I'm going to do, okay, so this stack view that has a dice, I'm going to call it dice stack. And then I'm going to take this dice stack, this result, score label stack, score label, and I'm going to restack these two elements. Okay, on one third stack, I'm going to call score stack. All right. Tweaking a little bit with the parameters here. Okay. And now, finally, what I'm going to add is a button that is going to cast the dice. So it's going to be a very funny button. Let's see. The button will have no text, an image. Okay. So we have the main elements on screen now. I'm going to add a third stack, which is going to encompass the two, the two previous ones. So I'm going to I'm going to call this one skeleton button. I'm going to move it up in the Z order. And now I'm going to take the button and the lower stack and restack. Nice. Proportionally, and then spacing here. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do, or not really the last thing, but is going to, now I have to use auto layout constraints to, stick this to the screen, because right now it looks center, right? But if I go to some other screen size, for example, this one smaller, evidently, we no longer have this thing, but it's not adapting yet to the screen. So I'm going to drag my main stack, control drag to the view, and I'm going to center horizontally, center vertically, and set also the width and the height, because constraints, objects need 4 constraints, 2 for size, and 2 for position. You can see we have some problem here. The dice are getting deformed because our layout doesn't really know how to handle this at this point. We're going to have to tell it. But I'm going to handle the main stack first. So the width, proportional to the screen, I'm going to set as 0.8, so I give it a little margin. The height, we're going to set it as 0.9, okay? And now I have to tell our layout that I want these dice to be squared. So basically what I do is I grab them, I drag them to themselves, and I set the aspect ratio, and then I specify that I want 1:1. So now it knows that it has to be square. I do the same with the other one. So now it's square. And now I'm going to do the same with the button, just in case. And set its aspect ratio to 0.83. Okay. So now, if I go to a different screen, it's not perfect because in 30 minutes you can't really fine tune to that degree. And I'm not going to use iPad because it would need a little more extra time, right? But whatever screen we choose now, it seems it's adapting properly. There's one last thing we need to do here, because if I decide to rotate my device, this doesn't look good. So I need to add one more condition and then tell auto layout that in case I rotate this device, I need the main stack to have a different distribution. This is called size classes, okay? So my main stack has here an axis that was originally detected by Xcode as vertical, because that's how I align my elements. Now I need to add another case and say, okay, if at any width, if the height is compact, which is defined as the shorter dimension, in whichever size you are, I'm going to want this in a horizontal distribution. It works, okay? So now I have a responsive UI interface that changes and adapts for whatever type of screen and whatever orientation, right? So now the time has come to just give it some code. The last thing I'm going to do is add one more image view here to the back, okay? It's going to be the felt, okay? Spec fill, and then I'm going to center it. Vertically container, and give it a make it as big as a container and just center in the container. Nice. I update here. It's kind of looking like a casino, right? Maybe. Nice. Okay, so now let's go for the code. I'm going to open here the assistant editor. I don't need this anymore. So I need to connect these graphic elements to my code in some way. There's going to be two ways. The first one is going to be as variables. They're called outlets, as you know. And the second one is going to be an action, which is a function that will be triggered when I press the skeleton button. So I need first to handle the dice. So this one is going to be dice one image. Dice image. Dice two image. Then the label. Score label. And that's it. We don't even need any more code or view load or anything for this very simple presentation. Now I need to add the connections for the code, which is the IP action, in which I'm going to put a function, and I'm going to call it as dice. This is my function. So whenever I press the button, this function is going to be executed. Let's open, it's time to close this, and I'm just going to go to the view controller to just see the code so we can see it bigger and better. Okay, so what instructions do we need here to make this game actually work? The first thing we need to set up some random numbers. We're going to set up a couple variables. Let dice one score equals, and this is a brand new function that came in the latest version of Swift, which is nice. We finally don't have to use for random. So we just use this random function that takes an interval, and then we got an integer number. We can between 1 and 6, and do the same for the second one. Dice two score. Random 1, 6. And then I need to add the result, which will be the combination of both dice. So let's score equals dice 1 score plus dice 2 score. Now we've got it. The next step, are you guys seeing this needs to be a little bigger, I think. Okay. Okay, so the next thing is we need to make those images match the numbers. Since we have important images with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, PNG, it's very simple here. We just assign a new UI image to our image. So dice one image, which is an image view actually, image equals UI image, and then this function takes a string, and so basically what I'm going to tell it is if I get a 1, take the file 1.png. If I get a 2, 2.png. So I use interpolation here to insert in my string the first score and then a PNG. Same thing for the second one. Okay, and then lastly, I need to show some kind of outcome, some kind of result as a result of the numbers. So I'm going to switch the variable, let me see if it can switch statement. Depending on the score, you might have several cases. The lowest, I've defined this game as lower numbers you lose, the highest numbers you win, and in the middle, just castigate, okay? So if we get a 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, we lose. If we get a 9, or 10, or 11, or 12, win, and the default case will be castigate. So I'm going to show in the score label what the result is by using its text property. And so if you lose, I'm going to insert this little Unicode character here. This is a sad guy crying. Where is it? Here. You lose. Okay, and if you win, well, this has to be 12. You win. And then I'm going to replace this one by this other nice. I made some money, character. And then finally, if you get neither of those, you cast again. So again, dice icon, and then cast again. All right, let's see how this looks. There's no animations here, it's just very simple. Let's run it on the simulator. I'm going to make it a little bigger. Reset the simulator. Just run it on 1 second. When you run an old machine with 8 gigs, you run into a bit of problems. Now, is it running a simulator? I'm not going to have time to do a launch screen. Okay. As we can see, the application responds to orientation. I press, I get a result on the dice, and wow, we have a little problem with that label because we need to tell the label that we do not want a fixed font size, but a scalable font size for the minimum scale, so we won't have that problem anymore. All right. And now we're going to be adding a couple animations here to make this a little more fun. So we can see that in Apple provides very easy frameworks to just perform basic animations. The same way we do this with 2D, in this case, because the presentation is short and we don't have time to show a 3D rotation, we could design all the frames of a three-dimensional transition in just with a very process that is not much more complicated than this. We could have the dice rotating 3D. Okay, and this is without using Sprite Kit, just with very simple. So I use the UI views class function transition. Okay. Setting up the interval time and what kind of automatic transition I want. Click from bottom. Here's going to be my animation code, and I'm going to leave the completion block empty for now. And now I'm moving this line up into the animation block. Let's see what happens. Okay. So the first dice is animating. It's this kind of animation would be more suitable for a card game because it's 2D, but it's really simple and it looks good. But neither the second dice nor the score label are actually waiting for the first dice to finish. So I'm going to nest the animations next. So I'm going to, inside the completion block of the first animation, I'm going to put another animation with the second dice. So I'm going to do the same. UI view, transition. Button. And I'm going to leave completion block. Empty. I'm going to move here. Block of code. Let's see what happens now. mean, from the time I started programming 33 years ago, this has progressed tremendously because we did not have, basically we didn't have operating systems. We had to do everything on our own, on C, assembly and all that. And so to me it's still amazing that just with 12 or 15 lines of code, I can do this. Because it's already, I mean, operating systems give more and more and more advanced and higher level of abstraction to the point where it's become really something very easy. I mean, and you can do like a Flappy Bird. If you know how to use SpriteKit, you can do a Flappy Bird in like 1 hour or less. All right, so now we get the first dice flipping, second dice is waiting for the first one to flip, but the label is not waiting. So the last thing we need to do is nest another animation. And so in the completion block of this one, I'm going to first hide the label when we're casting the dice. So score label dot alpha. Alpha, anybody who's, well, you guys know Xcode, designing alpha is the degree of opacity of something in the screen. So I'm going to make it invisible. And now I'm going to use the same function again. More advanced animation functions are like this one, animate with duration. We have many, many, many options, but in this one, I just need to use the very simple one, transition. So going to be with this one. I'm going to put a little longer here, and this is going to be a fading cross dissolve. And I'm not going to have any completion block here because this is my last thing. Now I have to move this. The first thing I'm going to do is score label the alpha equals 1, and then I'm going to take this block of code and just shift it and put it. All right? How many lines of code is this? From 13, oh yeah. Okay. So here's a wonderful new feature of Xcode 10. I can multiply my cursor, wow, and then write the same word. This is something. This and the refactoring of Xcode 9 were really amazing stuff that helped us developers a lot. All right. So it's like pretty much like 40 minus 20 something lines. That's what we get. All right. So now we get nice smooth effect on everything in an application that can be adapted to any screen. I can run it this in any kind of phone, any orientation, and I mean, guys, there's apps in the App Store that are as simple as that uploaded. There's gazillions of these. So my point is, with the new development of these operating systems, we get such amazing tools that we can do this kind of stuff in like 10, 15 minutes. And that's it. If you have any questions, because normally when I do this presentation, it is designed for beginners, people who are not familiar with Xcode. So I explain the basics of Xcode. I explain also, the parameters that I have to set up for the stacks, which are pretty tricky. Stacks are theoretically a very simple thing, but when you start to nest them, they can have strange and erratic behaviors if you don't know exactly what parameters you use in them, and that's very important to know. And when you combine it with, especially when you combine it with constraints, then it can get even tricky. Okay. So, does anybody have any questions? Oh, you can set it up. Oh, it's here. But all these functions I use here, as you probably know, they're just, class functions that come with UI Kids. It's just so amazing. You had a question?
There's also, instead to stack views,
that's why I say it's, that's why, yeah, that's why I say it's tricky.
I don't see it here, so I mean.
No, there's no warnings because everything is properly built. But that's why I say when you use stacks, it's and in combination with constraints, it gets tricky. You have to make sure that these properties from the stacks are, they're so to speak, compatible with the constraints you're putting inside. Okay, so I would have to see what a particular example of why is it failing, but it tends to do that a lot. Stacks are very tricky.
Maybe it's solved by putting an intermediary view between the side, stack view and then UI view, and then put it.
Well, that could fix the do the trick sometimes. But I do not recommend adding more elements because it's already quite difficult for the compiler to figure these things out. I mean, I would keep it as simple as possible. If you add, I mean, I could add views to increase margins and stuff, like you could add a view in the middle and have its relative height to the size of the stack or another element, and fine tune the interface even more. But then you get these kind of little risks. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I've implemented interfaces, that needed to be precisely adapted to the pixel in every iPhone, and then I even had to use alter the constants of the constraints by code for each and every model of phone. In the end, sometimes you have to do it. Any other question? Well, thank you very much for your time.